A warm welcome to you all on this absolutely gorgeous morning. If you're from out of town, you should know London's always like this, end of February, early March. We get sick of the sunshine, quite frankly. We all live in gold living rooms as well. What does it mean to be a worker in the 21st century? Most of us here are so deeply entrenched and immersed in technology and its changes, we can barely remember a former life. But the big leap, the seismic changes are in many ways still ahead of us. Today, with an absolutely stellar cast or casts, we're going to explore questions of automation, of the labour markets, of the future for the individual, for the company, for the leader, the entrepreneur. We're going to look at alternative visions of values in the workplace, and we'll ask how societies, countries, and indeed governments are preparing to meet what's coming round the corner. This much I promise, there will be a lot to think about. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this, the first Future of Work day of the conference. Before I introduce the host, forgive this, we've just got a few housekeeping items which I'll try and race through, but hope that they stick in. We've got a full house, so we're going to kindly ask you, if you do leave any of your seats, you just take your stuff off so that somebody else can use it. Don't travel with food between the ground and the first floor. Drinks, though, are fine. Phones on silent, but you can download the conference app for all the information of the day and search for World Post Future Series. And finally, we encourage you to tweet throughout the conference, and the Twitter handles will be on the screens here. You've got them there, at WPF Future Series, hashtag Future of Work. And we're also going to have our speakers' Twitter handles displayed on the screens during their sessions if you want to contact them or comment directly. But without further ado, that is the end of the housekeeping. Please help me welcome to the stage our co-hosts, Arianna Huffington, Nicholas Berggruen, and the World Post Editor-in-Chief, Nathan Gardels. Warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome. It's really absolutely wonderful to have you all here. This is the first World Post Conference, and it's the first birthday for the World Post, which is a partnership between the Huffington Post and the Berggruen Institute. It brings together our 13 international editions all over Europe, including Spain, France, Germany, and all our editors from all the editions are here. And then Asia, Japan, India, South Korea. It brings all our original content as well as the opportunities offered by the platform for voices from all these countries, together with the incredible reach of the Berggruen Institute into government, academia, the media. So it's been an amazing first year, and this is the culmination and the celebration. And I'm delighted that we have such a great group of speakers and such a great group in the audience. I hope you'll participate, make points, ask questions, and then I hope that we can continue the conversation on the World Post. So the conversation in a way starts with this conference and then goes on throughout the year. The emphasis of the conference is going to be on solutions, because we all know the problems, unemployment, inequalities, a skills gap. So what we want to focus today and tomorrow on is how do we solve all that. In fact, we've launched a global editorial initiative called What's Working, because we feel the media have put far too much emphasis always on the crisis, on the problems, on what's not working. And as a result, we've made it harder to scale the good things that are happening around the world. So we want both during the conference and beyond to put the spotlight on what is working, on the solutions. So in the same way that we talk about copycat crimes, we need to start generating copycat solutions and start a positive contagion. So instead of, oh, if it bleeds, it leads, we want to actually lead with solutions, and we want to keep that in mind throughout the conference. As you probably have seen from the program, there are multiple tracks: leadership, purpose, and well-being in the workplace, as well, of course, as what do we do with all the machines. We even have a robot speaking during one of the lunchtime sessions. So thank you so much for being here. enjoy the conference, and see you throughout. Nicholas?
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. Arianna said it very well. This is giving the World Post, in essence, a birthday party, a first-year birthday party, but we're doing it with a challenge in the sense that we're going to focus on a topic that's a key topic, which is what does work look like for, frankly, this generation and the next few generations. The World Post is a joint project of the Huffington Post and the Berggruen Institute. The Institute is interested in long-term issues of political governance, and we try to come up with non-ideological but very structural solutions. Obviously, the Huffington Post has extraordinary reach, and the combination of what the Huffington Post is doing every day and what Nathan Gardels has assembled in terms of editorial capability is really what the World Post is. So, work. I think this is maybe the first time that we can think as work as not really something that we potentially need to do to live. The other way around, we might have, and this is the first generation, or at least the next one, where part of the world can really look at work as an opportunity as opposed to as a chore. And so as much as we have challenges between globalization and technology, work is really something that I think the next generation can shape. And that's part of what we're going to discuss today and tomorrow at this conference. The other, since we are, let's say, quasi in Europe here, one thing that we've seen is that the world is moving very quickly, as we know, between globalization and technology, and the political world is, let's say, slower, and that's one of the big issues. And if we can't get the two to somehow work more closely in sync, we're in trouble. And that's one of the things that we at the Institute are trying to focus on. So thank you, Arianna, thank you, Nathan, and thank you especially for all of you to be up early in the, we should do it outside, sunshine, but thank you for being here for the next 2 days.
Thank you, Arianna and Nicholas. Before we dive into the topics, I want to just take a few brief moments to give you the broader view of the World Post and what it's about, and what its mission is, what its ambitions are. The World Post was born a little over a year ago, as was mentioned, in Davos in Switzerland. The idea being that we needed something to bridge the gap that's emerging in the global media. On the one hand, there's the contradiction and there's a paradox. On the one hand, the world is becoming more interdependent. On the other hand, the media is moving in the other direction, deglobalizing, renationalizing, relocalizing, and even tribalizing. So the paradox is that the age of information is becoming the age of communication across borders, political, ideological, and cultural. The World Post aims to try to bridge this gap with a global platform of cross-pollination by bringing in contributors from all around the world, looking at the world from around instead of looking out from a national perspective. It is often said that the internet is a global thinking circuit. The internet is global and it's a circuit, but it's not thinking yet, and we hope to contribute to that process. So far, the demand for this type of new journalism, I would say new global journalism, seems to be out there. Since launching last year, we now have 28 million monthly views. Conferences like this are part of the process. Now, every day, the World Post chronicles the long arc of what we see as two competing futures. Arianna alluded to this, and so did Nicholas. A world coming together and a world falling apart. Because of converging technological advance, from digital connectivity to regenerative medicine to artificial intelligence, we have the chance to spread unprecedented health, prosperity, and opportunity to all corners of the planet. Yet, all of us know, just looking around, that pervasive disruption is taking place associated with globalization and technological revolution. It's generating a reactive fragmentation. The signs of splintering are everywhere. Revived nationalisms, the reappearance of geopolitical blocs, ardent religious warfare, and bitter partisanship that threaten to dash this promise of a technologically convergent future. Can any of us forget that after those magnificent industrial expos at the turn of the 20th century, expos about industrial arts, that World War II ensued within very few months in 1914. Now, in this conference, we are focusing on one vector of these competing futures that will affect us all personally, our families, and our communities, and that is the future of work and the workplace. There are many questions that we'll address here. Are we seeing the emergence of a new economic model, the sharing and collaborative economy, where everyone is an entrepreneur? Will robots actually humanize the workplace by getting rid of rote tasks and rote work, leaving room for creativity and mindfulness? How do we integrate our own lives, our families, and our communities into a perpetually innovating, tech-driven knowledge economy? Can social media networks and networks transform rigid time schedules with a new flexibility, allowing work to come back into the home from the office and the factory? Will we find meaningful work with purpose and dignity and with enough to live on? Is productivity and wealth creation being divorced from employment? Will there be enough jobs for all those willing to work? And will those willing to work have the skills needed? These are just some of the questions that we will address in the coming 2 days in order to figure out where we want to go in the future, what kind of future we want, and what kind of future we can expect. So with those brief introductory comments, I'm going to invite Andrew McAfee, our first speaker, who's an expert on everything I just said. So, Andrew, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out today, and thank you to Ariana and Nicholas and Nathan for bringing us together and for kicking us off so well. I hang out at MIT back in the States in Boston, and I basically try to study technological progress and how it's changing the business world and changing the economy. So I want to try to set the stage for us this morning, and I want to do it in two parts. I want to simultaneously tell the story, I honestly believe this, of the best economic news in human history, and then a challenge that is appearing these days that is I don't think it's quite threatening that overall good news, but it honestly is imposing some new challenges and some new situations that we need to deal with. But it's always a good idea to start with the good news in a presentation, so let me try to explain what I mean by the best economic news in history. And to do that, I want to show some evidence going back in this country, data from Britain, going back honestly about 1,000 years. And you know how musicians often say, gosh, I wish I had written that song? The equivalent for geeks is, wow, I wish I had drawn that graph. I want to show you a graph that I honestly wish I had drawn. And it's a graph of what happened to the average British working person over literally about 1,000 years of history, going back to the 1200s. And it's a graph of what happened to their income versus how many of them there were versus population. And when you draw that graph, you notice if your clicker is actually working. When you draw that graph, you notice that for hundreds of years, Malthus was actually right. And that the only way that population went up is if wages went down. And the only way we actually earned more over time was if there were fewer of us. And the reason for this is dire, but it's really simple. There was a fixed amount of stuff to go around. And if you had more people, your overall standard of living had to go down as a result. So you see that curved line. We were honestly trapped in some flavor of Malthusian hell for hundreds of years. Something happened in the 1600s, honestly, nobody knows what. And then it kind of looked like we were heading into a slightly better Malthusian hell for a while. And then you notice, honestly, the trajectory of human history changed completely. Changed from one back and forth to a completely different direction. Happened right around the start of the 1800s. Everyone, it is not a coincidence that that was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, where for the very first time, thanks to technological progress, we freed ourselves from that resource trap, and we put ourselves on a trajectory where not only did people's wages go up, that's interesting enough, they went up as there were more and more people. And we went from this kind of vicious cycle of a fixed pie to an ever-growing pie that left people better off. I want to expand this time frame and try to make this point more concrete. And to do that, this graph I actually did draw, so I'm proud of this one. This is a graph, we've got about 4,000 years of history here. And what I'm trying to do there is draw the world population is in black there. And in the blue, there's this really nice measure of how advanced our civilizations are. I didn't come up with that measure, Ian Morris did. Really nice measure of just how advanced our civilizations were. And what you notice, and to be cheeky, I put some other big candidates for important developments in human history on this graph. The foundation of the world's great monotheistic religions, the Renaissance, the life of Alexander, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman, none of it matters. None of it substantially changed the material condition of humanity at all. What did, and you notice how those lines just went from basically horizontal to basically vertical at one point in time? That happened right after, again, here in Britain, James Watt's tinkering finally gave us a working, very efficient enough steam engine, and you see that humanity just entered a completely different trajectory. So the debate rages about the motive forces in human history. When I look at evidence like this, I really find the debate just about settled. Nothing has changed the trajectory of humanity like examples of technological progress. Now, I want to take this graph forward into the 20th century, and I want to show data from America this time. This is a graph, if you held, economists agree on absolutely nothing. That's kind of just a baseline assumption to walk around with. But if you asked a group of fractious economists for 4 lines, that would summarize the health of an economy, you'd get a bizarrely high level of agreement. They would, almost all of them would say, well, you got to look at output. Let's look at GDP per capita. Everyone would say you have to look at productivity. Are we getting better at converting our inputs into outputs? Most would say, let's look at how many jobs there are. As Nicholas and Ariana and Nathan said, having a job seems to be a really important thing. And then let's look at the quality of those jobs. Are those good jobs? Do they lead to higher average pay? So those are 4 lines. I'm not going to try to differentiate them here because they were all going up in lockstep. For decades after the end of World War II, we were in this happy position in the States and in the other industrialized countries of the West where all 4 of these were going up. They were going up in lockstep. The average worker was taking home in pay their productivity increases year after year. This was just a lovely period in several countries around the world. And then things changed. And I don't find it a coincidence, personally, I don't find it a coincidence that this started to happen right about, you notice how the graphs, the lines started to diverge starting in the early 1980s? I don't find it a coincidence that that's when the PC revolution started, that's when we started to have information technology pervade more and more deeply. And I find it deeply odd and a paradox in some ways that when this technology of individual empowerment and entrepreneurship and liberation, when this technology came along, the result was that in many ways the average worker stalled out. And that green line is median family income in the United States, which is, you see how it stalled out even before the Great Recession started, and it's actually heading in the wrong direction over time. That red line is just the raw number of jobs in the country. And again, it was stalling out before the Great Recession kicked in and is recovering, certainly not quickly enough. What we're observing here is a phenomenon that, as far as I can tell, we haven't seen before. The name that Eric, my co-author Eric Brynjolfsson, and I give to it is the Great Decoupling. This sense that there were a bunch of measures that were going up in lockstep, that were all moving in the same direction together. And then in recent years, they've started to diverge from each other. And you'll notice the ones related to output, the GDP per capita and the productivity, have kind of stayed on their historical trajectory. We would like them to be higher, and I'm sure we'll talk about that here. But they've kind of stayed on their historical trajectory. The ones related to the workforce, to average income and to job growth, those are where we see the challenges kicking in. So while, as I said at the start, you're not going to meet a bigger technology optimist than me. I think even here at this conference, you're not going to meet a bigger optimist than me. But optimist is different than utopian. And when I look at evidence like this, I do see that we have some challenges, which is one of the reasons I think we're all here for these 2 days. I want to show one more graph. Please don't show it yet. I want to show one more graph, but before I do, I need to make one thing really clear to everyone here. In addition to being an ardent technologist, I'm an ardent capitalist. I like our system of trade and property rights and individual autonomy and a decentralized economy. I like this a lot. It's far from perfect, but I kind of believe about capitalism what Winston Churchill believed about democracy, which is it's the worst possible system apart from all the other ones we've tried. I need to give that preamble because I'm about to show a graph of what's been happening to capital versus labor. And when I do that, everyone expects me to have a Che t-shirt on and start shouting slogans. That's not where I'm coming from with this. But I do want to show you what's been happening, how the fates of capital and labor have been diverging. It's a very recent phenomenon, and I find it a striking one. So here, again, data from the entire post-war period in the United States. The blue line here is one version of the returns to capital. These are just US corporate profits as a percent of GDP. And you notice they've been on a really healthy trajectory, had a nasty dip during the Great Recession, but they are higher than we have seen, I believe, ever before. So the returns to capital are pretty healthy these days, and we should applaud that. Profits are great. We like a healthy return to capital. That's how we keep the good times and the innovation rolling. The red line on that graph is the total percentage of GDP that's getting paid out in wages in America. And you notice that that was kind of holding steady with the blue line for decades and decades. And then just since the turn of the century, those two have diverged. We see the great decoupling again. And that red line is on a really sharp downward trajectory. Astonishingly enough, that red line includes the wages paid to some categories of economic superstar, to CEOs and professional athletes and folk like that. If we could back them out of the data, we'd be seeing that red line drop off even more quickly. This is not just an American phenomenon. It is not even a rich world phenomenon. This same decline in the labor share is happening in most countries where we have data around the world, including places like China, Mexico, and India. So I can't tell an offshoring story about that. China is not offshoring to Mars to find even cheaper labor. There's something else going on. So the question then becomes, what's underlying this? This great decoupling is so clear in so many different kinds of the evidence. We need to start looking for root causes here. And there's a set of explanations that I call the Gang of Four. And in my community of kind of business and economic geeks, we're spending a lot of time these days going back and forth about which of these likely suspects is the big deal here. What's the combination of culprits here? There's clearly technological progress taking place. Globalization is a huge phenomenon. Folk like Joe Stiglitz these days are talking about a rise of, you hear people talking about rent capture, about monopoly capitalism. There's this idea that something about the nature of our systems has changed, so that more and more of the gains are going to a smaller and smaller percentage of the people, of the companies. We're seeing more monopoly-flavored capitalism, and we need to watch out for that. And then finally, there's a group of explanations for what's going on that they keep on using words like malaise or stagnation or headwinds that the economy is facing. This sense that things are not as good as they used to be. I call this the grumpy old man school of explanation, because when I hear people talking about this, it always just strikes me as some guy shaking his cane and saying, back in my day, things were a lot better. All four of these in some combination are going on, and it's irresponsible, in a sense, if you're trying to be a careful scholar, to pick one out and to try to make the case that it's a bigger deal than the rest, but come on, you know. When I look around at what's happening with robots and cars that drive themselves, and could we go back one, please? And artificial intelligence systems that can do things like diagnose disease better than any human pathologist, that can play, by the way, the world's best Space Invaders player is no longer a human being. So you can give up trying to master that one. I believe by the end of this year, the world's best player of Go, the Asian strategy game, will no longer be a human being. We're seeing examples of technological progress that are honestly straight out of science fiction, and they're hitting the business pages on a regular basis. So when I look at the Gang of Four, absolutely 2 through 4 are going on. To me, the driving, the motive force in the economy has been technological progress. And from looking around at the work of digital geeks, the one prediction I can make with great confidence is that we ain't seen nothing yet. And the next 5 and the next 10 years are going to make what's come so far seem like a warm-up act, honestly. So this brings up why we're here for these 2 days. Can we go back one, please? What are the effective responses here? What should we be doing in response to the great decoupling and some of the other challenges that are coming up as part and parcel of this amazing era of tech progress that we're living in? And some parts are the subject of really productive, but really, really intense debates. Is there a rise in monopoly capitalism? If there is, what should we be doing about it? These are really important conversations to have. I want to bring up another point here, which is that there are things we know we should be doing, uncontroversial things that you would find in any economics textbook, whether it's written by Paul Krugman, who's a pretty well-known left-leaning economist, or Greg Mankiw, who's a pretty well-known right-leaning economist. If you grabbed their Econ 101 textbooks off the shelf and went to the chapter about effective policy, effective government role, you would find a huge amount of commonality. You'd actually learn that the debates are on the margin, in a sense. And there's a huge amount of commonality. And if you want to keep in mind the things that serious economists agree about, can we go back one, please? All you have to do we have the nursery rhyme, Old MacDonald Had a Farm in Britain? Do you do that here? Keep E-I-E-I-O in mind, and you'll have the playbook memorized. It's incredibly easy. We know that education is incredibly important to prepare people for whatever economy is coming. World-class infrastructure is an investment in the future. It helps out today and tomorrow. Entrepreneurship is the engine of innovation and job creation in most economies. We need to be good at this. You definitely want to let in the most skilled people, the right people, to help you with your work of innovation. And then finally, it's amazing, almost all economists would agree that the government has a role to play in supporting basic original research, because the private sector tends to underinvest in that. So just chant E-I-E-I-O to yourself and you'll have the playbook down. I want to show how we're doing on following this playbook. And I'll concentrate primarily on the United States because I know that best. We are squarely middle of the pack, deeply unimpressive on our primary education performance. This is amazing to me because we pioneered the idea of universal compulsory primary education, and we used to be really good at it. Now we're squarely in the middle of the pack. The problem is that we're doing a lot worse at the university level even than we are at the primary education level. There was some pretty disquieting research that came out recently about how much people are learning actually at 4-year American undergraduate institutions. By one pretty good measure, it appears that about half of the students enrolled at these universities are learning nothing measurable in the first 2 years, and somewhere around a third of them are learning nothing measurable after 4 years at these places. Something about our educational system appears not to be working as well. How are we doing on infrastructure? The average grade from the U.S. Society of Civil Engineers is a roaring D+ on American infrastructure. I think it's up from a solid D last year, so we should be happy about this. But Thomas Friedman has a lovely way to talk about the state of infrastructure in a lot of the rich West. He says when you take a flight from Beijing to JFK, It's like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. It's ridiculous how antiquated a lot of our infrastructure is. This is hard for a lot of us to believe because I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, and if you're hanging out in Silicon Valley or in Cambridge, Massachusetts, probably Cambridge, UK as well, you really feel like we're living in a time of unparalleled entrepreneurship and just amazing amounts of bubbling up activity in the economy. That is deeply misleading. By most of the good measures of business dynamism and business and labor force fluidity, things are heading in the wrong direction. New venture formation, new business formation in the US is on a long, slow, steady decline. Silicon Valley is a distraction from the main phenomenon. We don't quite know why this is, but I think we'd better figure it out. Immigration, I can't even bring myself to talk too much about immigration. I honestly feel like our immigration policies in the United States were designed by our enemies to hold us back. It's doing a good job, and the complete logjam in Washington, the complete lack of ability to do anything about it, is unbelievably frustrating. And when I talk to the immigrant entrepreneurs in America, the people who are fueling Silicon Valley, the Kafkaesque stories they tell about how they actually got to stay in America and do their work just blow me away. And then finally, American government funding for original research, whether you look at defense or non-defense, the situation is the same. We're spending about a third less than we did a generation or so ago. So as I chant E-I-E-I-O to myself, I'm not impressed by how well we're doing on these things. On the Econ 101 playbook, the stuff that's uncontroversial and therefore should be easy to do, we're making really, really poor progress on. So I want to wrap up. We've got time for a couple questions, but let me just say a few final words. The first point that I want to make, and I hope I've driven this point home, tech progress, we need to not lose sight of the fact that it is the best economic news on the planet. The old joke is that tech progress is the only free lunch that economists believe in. And so we should be heartened by this. The problem that we're not facing, and it continues to blow me away and impress me, and it goes back to something Nicholas said, the problem that we're not facing is a problem of increasing scarcity, of not enough to go around. In the lifetimes of almost everybody here, I think, we're going to solve what Keynes called the economic problem, the problem of scarcity. We need to never lose sight of how fantastic a fact that is. However, as we've looked around, I can largely guarantee you there is just no economic law that says that abundance that we're generating is going to be equally shared or is going to be shared in a way that any one of us would find equitable or fair. So we have an allocation, a sharing, a distribution challenge coming up. I think that's a better challenge than the challenge of not enough to go around, but it is a challenge. And then I want to put up the final sentence in our book, which I deeply believe. Technology and tech progress are not the same things as our destiny. We get to pick what kind of society we live in, what kind of world we want to create, and how we want to treat the people around us. As I said, you'll go a long way before you find a bigger believer in tech progress. I'm not a technology determinist, though. We get to determine what kind of world we're building, which I think is why we're all here. We have time, I hope, for a couple questions. We have time for a couple, especially if we keep them quick. Was I that clear or that boring? I don't know which, but yes, please.
What's your view on Thomas Piketty's approach to this?
So the question is about Thomas Piketty. My view on Thomas Piketty is that he beat us out for Business Book of the Year, so to hell with him is my short way of saying that. Piketty concentrates largely on that monopoly capitalism view of things, on the ability of an increasingly small group of people to take home more and more of the gains of an economy. I'm not saying that's not going on, but there's a huge debate. It's very unclear exactly how much of that is going on, and the more people poke at his evidence, as I read it, it's very clear that inequality is soaring, especially up at the tippy top of the income or the wealth distribution. That's clearly going on. His explanation for why is a good deal less convincing to me, mainly because I think he uses the word technology once or twice total in the book. I think he's missing a big part of the plot. So we have time for one more. It needs to be a really bang-up question. Can you do that?
Yeah, your chart of private employment and labour productivity in the US, if you were looking at the same data in the UK, you basically flip those. So last 5 years, labour productivity has been flat in the
Yeah.
UK, and private employment has actually soared. Wondered if you had any thought about why that's true.
So there's this interesting wrinkle in the data that we're seeing where I showed a nice upward trend in productivity growth. Productivity growth has actually been really anemic in a lot of countries. The UK, the US has not been very good lately. Again, we're scratching our heads about why. There has been healthy private employment growth in the US, primarily down at the low end of the wage or the skill distribution. What I think we know from that is that the jobs are coming, but they're coming down in the physical service industry. They're jobs that robots literally cannot do yet. There's no robot anywhere on the planet that can do this. It's just an incredibly difficult task for a machine. So for most of the work that involves the physical world, clearing a table in a restaurant, making a bed in a hotel, taking blood from someone's arm, we need people for those jobs. Those are not terribly well-paid jobs, and because it's very clear the middle class is getting hollowed out, once that happens, those formerly middle-class workers come down and look for work there. So that's explaining, I think, some of the wage dynamics that we're seeing down at the low end. It also helps explain, I think, some of the productivity statistics that we're seeing, because those are not terribly productive jobs. If you want more output, you have to hire one more person. They're not very supported by technology yet, but I think we'll learn over the next 2 days that technology is coming even in those sectors. So thanks very much.
Thank you.